Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sober Grind podcast. I'm here today. My name is Pej, and I'm with Austin Armstrong.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. Episode 7.
Episode 7, and what today's topic is addiction in families?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Does that even happen? Is there addiction in families?
Well, we're going to find out.
All right, we're going to find out.
So, Pej, in your opinion, is it common to see multiple people abuse substances in a family?
Is it common? I mean, I see so many different families, and there's addiction in many families. Sometimes it's just one sibling or one parent. Sometimes, yes, I've seen people come to treatment in pairs. Sometimes brothers and sometimes
brothers, sisters, or brothers.
Sometimes
brothers.
in couples. Definitely.
Yeah.
So addiction. Obviously, some of the people that are in our families could be major influences for us, and sometimes they can be good influences, and sometimes they can be bad. So, sure, if my big brother was using drugs and I look up to him, then I would probably follow suit. Yeah. So it can be common. Yeah. Not in all families. There's a lot of families where it's just one particular person, and everybody else is like dealing with that one particular person's addiction or alcoholism.
Gotcha. What about like a parent and child perspective? So have you ever seen like a mother-daughter, father-son, or any variation there used together and even take it to that next level that maybe they become addicts together?
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
Sadly, I have. There's a few things. You have to understand, when it comes to obviously using and drinking, a lot of people don't perceive drinking as using drugs, even though alcohol is a drug. Okay, it's a substance. And so let's say, for example, there's a mother and her daughter is, whether she's of the drinking age or not of the drinking age, they may have a glass of Chablis or just drink together or something, some wine. So that, in a sense, can be seen as using together, but
Sure.
It's also, in a social event, it's just something that people do socially. So, I don't really see that as a major problem if they're not alcoholics and they're just having a drink or two or three together at a party, for example. But when it comes to using hard drugs, I mean, it's not that common that I have seen a lot of parents using with their kids, but I've seen it. And I've seen it, but there was a woman who was in treatment shortly after me in the same treatment center as me, who she never really wanted to get well. She was a great lady. She had a good personality. She always tried, but for some reason, recovery, she did not embrace recovery. And then down the line, fast forward about 9 years later, the same little girl that used to come visit her in treatment with the father had grown up and gone to the same treatment center, and it turns out that they were shooting meth together.
Wow.
It's very, very sad and scary,
Yeah.
and to think that, I think misery loves company, and I think at a certain point the mother may have been such a great influence for the daughter, not a great influence, a very negative influence for the
Powerful
daughter.
influence.
To the point where the daughter, she knew no other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad.
There was also, I remember when I was growing up, we had a neighbor whose dad was, he was, okay, so basically he was the dad that would allow us to use drugs and alcohol in their house. And he lived right across the street from us, so it was very convenient for us that we're all experimenting and having fun to go over there. And so we would smoke pot with his dad. We would do all kinds of things. I remember we would do meth with his dad. We would do cocaine with his dad. And there's a lot to be said about that. There's a reason I think that a parent would take it to that extreme and be okay with the fact that they're using drugs or alcohol with their kid. I think it's very psychological. I think that perhaps sometimes there may be something deeper going on with the dad to where they disregard the fact that this is my kid, and they have more of like they want to be like a friend to the kid. Sometimes they have this absurd mentality where they think, well, at least if they're just using in the house, they're not using out in the streets, and they won't be.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah,
in danger.
We kind of talked about this in a previous podcast episode, but I'd seen a lot of this growing up too, mostly with alcohol, some marijuana, never hard drugs for me personally, but it does not surprise me that there are cases like that.
Right.
And a lot of what we heard from the parents is exactly that.
Right.
That they know that we're going to do it, but they'd rather us do it in a safe spot.
Right.
In their home.
I mean, even growing up, the whole high school experience, the partying experience. I remember when I was a kid, the movie Risky Business came out with Tom Cruise, and it was like I watched that, and I was like, wow, that's a high school party. Like I want to do that so bad. So before you knew it, when I was in my sophomore, junior, senior year, we were caravanning around. All of our friends were driving around looking for the party. Where's the high school party? Often we would show up to somebody's house whose parents were out of town and they were having a kegger, and we were all drinking. Some people were smoking weed. Some people were doing other stuff in the bathroom. Regardless, we were all getting loaded at these people's houses. Sometimes we'd show up to some people's houses and the parents would be there and greet us at the door. And I just think, like, really? Like, this guy's mom is
That's
okay?
crazy.
Sometimes the parents would buy the keg, So I think that they were of that mentality that, at least they're not out drinking and driving. They're kids, like let them have a little bit of fun. We had fun when we were younger, so why can't they? So they would provide, they would actually, that's in a sense enabling very much,
Yeah, slippery slope there.
Slippery slope, but a lot of parents are okay with that,
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So I've heard a lot in the past about addicted family roles. So kind of the roles that people fit into when there's one addict or maybe multiple addicts. So those roles are the enabler, the hero, the scapegoat, the lost child, and the mascot. Can you go a little more in depth about what those are and what those roles kind of mean?
Sure. So this is from what I've learned. I mean, I went to school for this stuff, so definitely I had it, like when we talking about this today, I had to like recap and just make sure. But this is kind of like what I remember when I was in school. There was a lot of talk of ACA, adult children of alcoholics, okay, or addicts, and there are actually 12-step meetings for them too, and I remember learning about various roles, and then I based it off of my personal experience and seeing certain people, how they fit into those categories and roles of those people. I remember there was like the mediator, the one that would kind of be, would help between the family members. He would help that person, like the sick mother who's an alcoholic, be able to communicate. He would do all the communicating for them. He was like between them to the family or to whoever else they needed to. And then there was the silent child, like the one that had no voice, basically. So then I learned, and I learned all of these roles that you just named right now, and they all fell into that category as well. The enabler obviously can be anybody in the family. It doesn't just have to be the mother or the father. Have you ever heard the term helicopter mom?
No, what does that mean?
So like a helicopter mom, basically they are so used to raising their child by always making sure everything is put together. They kind of run the child's life. They want to make sure that the child is on the right path. But
I've definitely seen that.
It can also cause addiction and alcoholism because the kid grows up wanting to be this perfect child in the eyes of their mother, and when they can't be, they start kind of regressing and going in the other way and using and drinking, and they may go away to school or something like that, and then the mom falls apart because they can't keep their eye on them. And often we would have clients that if we try to get them into treatment, they would be on the phone with us when we used to work admissions, and all of a sudden the mom would just come and interject and say, no, but you have to do it like this and you have to do it like that. She just wanted to like constantly, and then the kid would never get well because the mom was enabling them to the point where they were just keeping them under their roof and making sure that they were following their guidelines, even though they were still using and drinking in their own mother's house, right? So there's several different types of forms of enabling. If you're basically harboring somebody in your house that's using and drinking, and you're not letting them get well, you're always trying to fix them. That's a form of enabling. And then the hero is basically somebody who draws attention to. They draw attention. They basically will draw attention to themselves so that the focus isn't on the addict. And they'll come up with these, they'll try to make themselves look really good within the family setting, and sometimes it's imaginary. It's just like they're making something up so that nobody's focusing on the addict. That's what I learned the hero to be.
Okay.
The scapegoat creates other problems. They'll basically, they'll create other stuff and do other things to make you not be looking at the addict alcoholic. And then the lost child is basically a child that ignores the problem. I was recently doing an intervention, And it was on a 24-year-old young man who was totally defiant, totally combative, calling me every name in the book. Mom, dad, sister were there. The sister was older. She's at least 27 years old. Kid went outside to go smoke, but he actually went to leave. Mom and dad are going at it in the living room, and they were divorced. But now that they've been around again, now they're going at it, and to the point where they were yelling at each other so much to where I try to get in between it and tell him stop. Like if he comes back and he hears this, I understand now why he doesn't care or he doesn't want to get well. Well, I looked at the sister in all of this. She wasn't losing her stuff. She had no emotion, no affect. She was just sitting there with a blank look on her face, as if she's seen this several times before.
So it's just nothing normal or nothing out of the normal for her.
Nothing. She was kind of ignoring the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think that she was numb to it. She had endured this experience so many times that I even said in that moment I wanted to bring the focus on her. I stopped them both to a certain extent. One would tell the other, you did this, you did that, you did this,
a lot
you
of
did
ego
that.
in play there.
And I stopped them for a second. I said, for one, I know why your kid is doing heroin. Now it's clear as day for me why he wants to just not deal with this, right? And for two, I give props to the young lady right here who's not saying anything. She's basically handling herself quite well. She goes, yeah, I don't say anything and I don't go use over it, but look at my brother. He's dying, So it was all bad. And then a mascot is somebody who basically tries to ridicule or make humor out of the whole situation to not have you see the extent and reality of what's really going on. Just make a joke out of it. And they say that a lot of comedians come from dysfunctional homes. So they're jokers. They're basically not laughing at other people's expense, but they want to, more for better sake of words, just deflect from focusing on the reality of it by just being humorous, because they don't know any other way how to function. They want to just basically laugh it off.
Yeah, a lot of people cope with uncomfortable situations by laughing and humor.
A lot of times. There was a lot of people that I've worked with in treatment where you're looking at them in a group and they should be crying or they should be showing like some kind of emotion. They laugh or they smile or they smirk.
It's a coping mechanism.
Right. It's a defense coping mechanism for sure. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, is there a sort of a best role to try and put yourself in? And what do you see as the most common role that people fall into, if any?
Well, I don't think there's a common role. I think it varies per family.
Okay.
Depending on the upbringing, the amount, what kind of events have happened in that family. There's a lot of sexual abuse and there's a lot of trauma that we don't really know what's going on in that family function or family unit. So it'll vary from places, and I think that's why people fall into certain particular roles. It's like, depending on, like, if your dad was a violent man, you may fall into one of these roles, as opposed to if your dad was timid and never yelled or never raised his voice, but had this anger that was just like within him. You may take on a whole different role, depending, right? So I think it varies. I think it definitely varies. How can somebody identify what role they're in? That depends. Like I said earlier, there's ACA, which is actual meetings for adult children of alcoholics and addicts, and sometimes rage-aholics. So some people experience no alcoholism and no addiction in their homes, but they experience rage, which is just as bad. If you have somebody that's always blowing their top and yelling and throwing things and using objects to throw at people in the house or whatever, or they're using their hands and hitting people in the house. Well, this is going to definitely make the lost child become, very numb to the whole situation and quiet and not have a voice and not talk and just kind of just check out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue, or even kind of answers my next question of, if you're the child and you grow up in a family that your father, mother is an addict or a rageaholic or a drug user,
Right.
Where does that commonly take the child? Is it lost child? Is it where do they typically develop? Or again, is it all over the place?
It's all over the place. I mean, I've seen it often. I've seen some kids that will, if you can't beat them, join them. They'll just use with them. or they'll
Got it.
use themselves. They'll go off and do their addiction in their life on their terms, and just because that's all they saw.
Yeah.
Then I see some kids I've seen kids whose parents were full-blown meth addicts, and they wouldn't touch meth. They didn't want to have anything to do with it because they just saw, what kind of damage it's done in their own home. They didn't want to even be around it. So they kind of just despised their parents. They despised the addiction, and they've branched off and gone and done other things. Some kids get lost in the books. Some kids get lost in reading or education because they know that there's basically a big pink elephant in the room whenever they go into any room in their house, and the only way that they can kind of quiet their mind is to go into the books and engulf them. They become addicted to the books. They get lost in the books.
Got it.
Which also can be dangerous because down the line, other addictions can form out of that, depending. I mean, I've seen it. It sounds odd, but you think they would be smarter than that if they saw this in their household. But many things can happen, not just addictions, but a lot of, psychological, cognitive effects can happen. Things like, depression. They'll go through a lot of depression or a lot of anxiety, or they're always on edge. They're not happy with the world because who would be when you grew up in that type of environment? Like I said earlier, the mediator, the one who is trying to work between the parents, or there's different types of roles. But growing up in that, how do you overcome things like that? Well, basically, if you gain knowledge about what your role might be, there is help out there that can help you better work through it and identify how to overcome this overbearing sense of, sadness or pain that you endure in that type of environment.
So how would you best identify what role you're in? Is that through therapy, through just
it'll happen
self-analyzing?
Often if somebody just, ends up in therapy, the therapist knows, if a good therapist could identify just by listening to you and your experiences what role and category you fall into. And then obviously they have different tools and techniques on how to work through your personal issues that you've been carrying around as a result of a dysfunctional home.
Got it.
And I say a lot of this stuff from experience.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Hypothetical situation. You have, unfortunately, a mother, father, son, daughter, all addicts.
Right.
Can you do a family intervention for all of them, and how would that even work?
Well, I mean, that depends. If you have all 4 people in this family unit that are addicted, depending on who wants to bring on the intervention. For example, if it's grandparents, I think that this would take some serious planning. I mean, it's a hypothetical question.
Sure,
it would take some serious planning. We would have to know the history of the family. How long has addiction been running rampant in their lives? Was it a newer thing that happened over the years due to family struggles or economical struggles or, economical insecurities and things like that? Or has this been going on a long time? Did this happen to the parents as they were growing up? Were their parents using? So it depends on who wants to actually bring on the intervention and what their intention is of helping this family. It could be on a each person basis where you intervene on each person. And, who knows? Maybe, I don't know. I've never had such a situation, but it would be interesting. Like, how would you intervene on an entire family? Because I think the problem with that is that you may have different people reacting in different ways.
Yeah.
Perhaps the parents may have that guilt and shame that they've been carrying around and numbing out due to their addiction, but maybe the kids don't know any better because they never really had responsibilities.
Do you think it would be easier to have them all in one intervention together or do it separately?
I think separately would be better.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, again, you'd have to know the family's history and see what's really going on with this family. I mean, that's pretty crazy if all 4 of them are using and drinking. Not to say I wouldn't discount that from not happening. It happens. It happens a lot. I mean, when you asked me commonly earlier, no, not every house on the block, in America has the whole family unit or a couple of people in the house using apart or together. But it does in some areas, just not all that commonly. So. And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
We need somebody in the house to just be a codependent to identify the problem and seek the help.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that was incredible. Pej, thank you so much. That was awesome. If you need an intervention, call this man.
Thank you.
So incredible. That's a wrap on episode 7 of The Sober Grind. Unless you have any other aspects on addiction and
No, it
families
was my
that you'd
pleasure
like
to
to bring up.
be alongside you again
Yeah.
in our Sober Grind podcast. And do you want me to talk about it, or do you want to talk about it?
I think you should.
So also, we have our Facebook. We do a live stream every week. I'm on there a lot. Dr. Bob Weathers is on there. I believe Tarek is on there too. Well,
Tarek will be soon, yeah.
we're all in affiliation with Beginnings Treatment Centers. That's where I work, where Austin works, and we also have another page on Facebook. If you go up in that little bar at the top and type in "Ask an Addiction Specialist," we have an amazing group there where if you can ask any questions in relation to addiction. We have professionals. We have people that are in recovery that are usually always readily available to answer your questions. You can ask anything there. You can just come and be part of the group, and you can even answer questions if you would like.
Yeah, I want to add in there too, it is a completely private group too. So if there's anything that you feel a little uncomfortable talking about, know that it's only people that are in the group can see the posts. So hopefully that helps you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you again.
Remember to write a review for
Yes,
this. And
yes,
tell your
please.
friends about this. Spread the word. Sober Grind. It's a big deal. We really want to get the word out that people are staying sober. People have good lives. We're always in the solution. We don't like to focus on the problem, but we don't like to disregard it and pretend like it's not there. So talk about it. Let us know. Write a review. Tell us what we're doing. Right, wrong, anything. We want to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
See ya.